Chapter 8 is built around I believe it's our first project. It's not, it's a project. We're going to be dealing with buying a house, which is super interesting and super applicable. It's one of my favorite projects I've ever taught with. But in order to build into that, we have to kind of have an understanding of how interest works. So that's what these next couple of sections are. This one is pretty short, and honestly, I believe the course captain kind of skips it because it's not very often used as a real way to compute interest. But that being said, I like to cover it. Probably going to be 10-15 minutes, because then we can kind of build off of it and say, okay, this is why that's not super accurate. Here's a better way to compute interest. So this is called the simple interest formula. It's the most basic interest formula you're going to see. And its interest is equal to your principal times your rate times your time. And you might think, okay, what is principal? Principal is your, it might be PLE. Anyway, someone can look that up. Principal is how much money you invest or how much money you initially put into a savings account. Rate is going to be their percentage rate, and T is going to be time in years. And if you have a rate, like if it's 12%, you're going to have to convert that to a decimal first. So same thing we've seen before. I'd move my decimal place over twice, and I would get 0.12. Okay, so to see it in practice, I deposited $2,000 in a savings account that has a rate of 6%. How much interest will I earn by the end of the year? Okay, well, my rate is 6%, so move the decimal over, I get 0.06. My principal is how much I initially deposited, so that's that 200 or 2,000, and then it's asking at the end of the year, so 1 year has passed. Then I just multiply those through. 2,000 times 0.06 times 1 gets me my interest. Now, it's important to note that's just my interest. That's how much is earned in my account. So I'm not going to go, if I want to go withdraw money from my savings account, it's not just going to have the 120. It's also going to have what I initially had in my account, which brings us into the future value formula. So future value formula is a very just fancy way of saying, okay, instead of figuring out the interest, now we're going to figure out how much we actually have in our account. So we didn't have random withdrawals or deposits. And so the formula looks very similar to the last one because we have our interest, so that's our PRT, and then our principal again. So it's pretty intuitive. What we're doing is we're finding our interest, we're adding what we had initially, and that will give us the total amount. We did a little bit of fancy algebra and factoring, but we don't really have to do that. You could have stopped and used the second to last formula. You would get the exact same result. It's just, I believe if you're following along in the book, this is the formula that they use. Now, it says, suppose you spend $4 a day each day, 5 days per week on coffee. How much do you spend on coffee per year? So this question actually doesn't really have to do with interest at all, or at least the first part doesn't. You just take, oh, I spend $4 every day, 5 days a week, so 4 times 5, and then how many weeks are there in the year? 52. Multiply those all out. I spend $1,000 and $1,040 on coffee. And then if I plug all of that into a calculator, I will see that my future value will be $1,092. I made an interest of $52. But we're looking future value. That's how much would be in my account if I wanted to go and withdraw, or even if I just wanted to see my end result. That's the end of this section. Now let's bring interest into the equation, or the question. Instead of spending money on coffee, let's say that I take all of that money that I could have spent, I maybe like decided to make coffee at home or something like that, and instead I invest it into a bank account that has a rate of 5%. Now, realistically speaking, 5% is a really, really, really good interest rate. You're more likely to find 0.05%. All of that being said, the formula and the process would be exactly the same. So I'm going to use my future value formula. I originally would have spent $1,040. Let's assume that I could have just saved that up for the year and then put it in a bank account. So that's my principal. My rate is 5%, so 0.05. And in this case, I invested for an entire year, so that's 1.